We're coming to you from the DraftKings.com podcasting studios. DraftKings.com, America's one-day fantasy sports site, where it's like a new season every time you play. DraftKings.com.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
They got Robert Griffin out of the fake football game tonight. I always say about fake football, that's what I call the preseason, fake football. The only thing that is real about fake football is the injuries. And Shannon, have you seen any of these clips? I've just been looking at GIFs on the internet.
Oh, I'm hurt. Oh, my neck, my back, my neck and my back. Oh.
Dude, Robert Griffin's like the life of the party back there. Just bow, bow. Like, I just saw one of him getting horse collared. I seen one of him getting hit dead in the chest. Let me see if I forgot one of them. Because, look, he attempted 8 passes. He got hit 6 times. The ESPN.com report about Robert Griffin in that game involves the phrase, under siege. Shannon, he's under siege.
Yeah, he left the game with it appears to be a stinger and a possible head injury.
A stinger and a possible head injury. I applaud the fact that he was able to tell him about both, right? Then there's this one I'm looking at on the Vine. What's this guy's name? Scherf? Riley Scherf? Is that who they drafted? Number 5 to play guard, which is really high to take a guard. Shannon, have you seen this play where he just got bogarted? Like, I don't even know who plays defensive tackle for the Lions anymore. Who is number 93? Because your man Scherf looked like me trying to block him. All right, Griffin, I just can't imagine what it's like to be back there. Just, like, imagine you being in a situation where an NFL defensive line is running at you and there is no offensive line in front of him, okay? Because if you can imagine a situation with an NFL defensive line coming at you and no offensive line in front of you, then you understand exactly what's going on right now with the R's against the Lions. Because it looked like Robert Griffin's out there like it's a skeleton drill, except it's not supposed to be a skeleton drill. It looked like he had a 7-on-11 drill, Shannon.
He's out there playing Killer Man with the ball.
Yes, that is exactly what it is. That's exactly what's going on there. He's getting the ball in the pocket, and it's looking like he's returning a punt. Like, it looks exactly the same. That's the situation that this dude is in right now. How do you ruin this? Like, I know we've talked about this before, but we can't. How in the world could a franchise draft a ready-made star? Because don't forget, he walked in the door with fairly absurd expectations and actually met them and managed to exceed them. Griffin in that rookie year, if I recall, he led the league in yards per rushing attempt and yards per passing attempt. I mean, that's pretty damn impressive. And even while that was going on, it seemed like Mike Shanahan and his son were like, so how can we ruin him? Never forget this. I forget what week of the season it was. Shannon, you may remember this play. They were playing against the Steelers. And they got the bright idea to run a pass play that had Robert Griffin running 20-something yards down the middle of the field. Like, this wasn't no throwback screen, right? You know the throwback screen, right? Where, like, the quarterback will get it to a receiver, run a reverse, and then they'll run backward. No. They had Robert Griffin run a route. Earl Briles did something dumb like that, too, by the way. We had Robert Griffin run a seam route once, I think in the fourth quarter. Ryan Clark hit Robert so hard. And I asked Ryan, I was like, yo, what were you thinking when you saw that? He was like, oh, man, I sized him up from 20 yards away. 20 yards away. Because how often do you get the chance to rain on a quarterback running down the field? That's got to be every defensive back's dream right there. Like, this dude doesn't know what he's doing out here. He got no idea. He's a quarterback. Why would you ever do that with the guy you just traded all those first-round picks to get? Like, why would you do that? Why? Because Mike Shanahan was treating Robert Griffin like a running back. That's why. You know what Shanahan treated Robert Griffin like? He treated Robert Griffin as if he, Mike Shanahan, was a guy who had no plan on being there very long.
He coached like he had nothing to lose. Well,
like it was a rental car. Yeah, I'll take that curb. Why not? It's a rental car. Like, think about all the things that you do in rental cars. That was the stuff that they were doing with Robert Griffin. All right, so he's got this torn ACL. All right, but we got it till the end of the season, right? Like, that's how it was a rental car. Well, we got it till Sunday. So we got it till the end of the season. Yeah, we'll just go out here. We will run our franchise quarterback's leg into a nub. Why not?
Like, we got insurance. We're good.
Yeah, has any team ever handled a quarterback worse than this? Because I don't see any way that it can work for them this year with Griffin. I do think that they kind of have to start him. But I don't see any way that it can work there because the whole situation is just so broken in every single way. So now you get to this point where you're looking for whose fault it is. Is it Robert's fault? Is it Jay Gruden's fault? Is it the talent's fault? Is it Dan Snyder's fault? And it just doesn't matter anymore. It just doesn't matter anymore. How can this work? Does anybody have any answer for that? How can this work, the situation they're in? Because, dude, under siege, that was the most accurate description that I could give you for what. How you get hit 6 times and you try to throw the ball 8? Now, this part I also understand, too. It kind of goes both ways, right? I understand the people who are critical of doing things in the preseason, like running screens on third down and stuff like that, because it's not helping you. It's not getting you to where, to figure things out, so forth and so on, right? At the same time, at some point, don't y'all need to start throwing some screens to slow the pass rush down a little bit?
A handoff or something?
Like, I understand this. They don't want him to be the starter. But there's a reason why he's the starter, on top of the fact that they traded all them picks for him. Have you seen the other 2 dudes? Some dude hit me up and was like, the only NFL-ready quarterback they have is Kirk Cousins. I'm like, ready to do what? They're ready to do what in the NFL? I tell you, people got the shortest memory when it comes to Kirk Cousins. I don't know what all they remember when they think of Kirk Cousins is what he looked like in that baseball cap on the sideline. Hey, that looks like a good quarterback right there. There it is.
It's all the intangibles.
Yeah. Doesn't look very fast either. Put him in the game. But, hey, man, they got to do something because it's going to be such a colossal disaster this year. And a big part of why it's going to be a colossal disaster, this is like separate from anything that has to do with Jay Gruden as a coach, right? He is not really prepared for, like, the non-football parts of coaching. Like, does he ever win the press conference? He never wins the press conference. He never gives that impression like I'm the man in charge. Like I'm a man that you should listen to and respect. You never really get that vibe off of Jay Gruden when he's up there. And he's going to have to give a lot of those speeches this year, it looks like, because I don't know how they're going to be good at anything. Like, I mean, really, seriously, how are they supposed to be good? Because if they turn this around, I'll walk it all back. But y'all are all watching the same games that I'm watching. And if they turn out to be good, it's not because I'm wrong. It's because something happened. What the hell could that something possibly be looking at that unit right now? And what they'll have is this last year of Robert Griffin, because the next year is the option year, right? Like, this is basically the last year of Robert Griffin. This is make or break for him, which really means it's also make or break for Jay Gruden. Because here's the thing for Jay Gruden. If it doesn't work with Robert Griffin this year, they have to go draft a quarterback next year. You can't be the guy to coach him. Like, what has Jay Gruden demonstrated that would lead you to believe that he's the guy that you want coaching your quarterback? Like, really. I mean, I'm not holding Andy Dalton against him because I don't think anybody can coach that guy and make it happen. However, in Washington, what coaching up have you seen? What to get that one, like, part of a good game for Colt McCoy? Like, what have you seen to indicate that Jay Gruden is the guy that you want to leave alone with your next quarterback? Because he hadn't done a damn thing with the one you hired him to coach. And you could blame that on Robert. You could blame that on Jay. I don't know where the answer goes. But I don't know if you remember this when it came to the end with the Titans, where Jeff Fisher and Vince Young couldn't figure it out. Which one of them wound up leaving? Both of them.
Bomani.
Right fast, we were just having a little bit of a roundtable discussion. I mean, it's still a relevant question because Robert Griffin still won't cut those braids. Shannon, who do you think does those braids for him?
I don't know, but whoever does, it doesn't look like they finish.
I mean, he look funkified, don't get me wrong, but it's got to be his mom that does those braids, right?
For his sake, I hope so. I hope he's not paying for him.
Well, yeah, hey, I will tell you this. I have a very good friend of mine who is a barber, right? Like, he's an actuary now, but he also cuts hair. And he told me that he used to have a dude who would come into his shop, and this is in, the late 20th century, like 1999, like 2000, like wrapping around, And he said the dude would come in, he was an old head, and he found the hairstyle that worked for him, and he never let it go. And for him, that hairstyle was a shag, right? Like, he was just rocking a shag like he was in New Edition, short on top, long in the back. Understand some of y'all in y'all's culture call it a mullet, but shag is a different beast. It's the same, but it's different, okay?
Right.
So if you need to visualize it, go pull up a picture of Bobby Brown circa 1985,
Ralph had one, too.
Yeah. I mean, the whole crew had one. Look, kind of group that was. Couldn't one dude get a shag without everybody else getting a shag? So anyway, my man said he would cut this dude's hair and he would give him the shag. And he did it under one condition, man. He's like, yo, man, you can't tell anybody where you got this. Like, he said his shag was clean. He said he gave him a clean shag every time. He said he gave him nothing but his best work. But you can't tell nobody I'm out here giving shags. Whoever is braiding Robert Griffin's hair, that's an industry secret. That'll be the first time somebody hands Robert Griffin the non-disclosure agreement. Like, nah, yeah, you got to sign this, man. Ain't no talking when you get out of here. I got an image to uphold. Like, by the way, you have an image to uphold, too, so perhaps you might want to get rid of those braids. But you can't do that if you're the person that's actually, like, doing the braids. Because then, the money goes away. But it's got to be his mom. That's it. It's got to be his mom. I would also like to know, and I've never heard anything about this, Shaddy. Robert Griffin's daddy is in the military.
Right.
What does he think about those braids? Like, how did those conversations go in the house while Robert was growing that hair? Because it had to get to an afro stage, right? So then it gets to the afro stage, and then it goes from there. Imagine the things his daddy said to him when he was a teenager about his hair. They probably went through those phases and everything, too. You know how that goes when you're growing up? What'd he tell him about that hair?
Nah, son. If you want to keep working here, you got to cut those hair. You got to cut those braids, man.
I told you about when I had those braids my first year of grad school. I had some braids, and then I came home for the summer, and I was at home with my dad, and I was looking for an internship. This internship was supposed to come through, and it hadn't come through. Like, it just wasn't coming through. And then my dad, who's like the coolest dude in the world, he walked in the house with two $20 bills. He handed me one, and he said, this one is for some gas. I was like, good looking out. It's 2002, baby. $20 worth of gas, that gets you through, right?
Right.
Good looking out, man. I appreciate that tank of gas. And there's the other $20 bill. This was for a haircut. Get a job. And then he told me something I'll never forget. You're getting a little bit too old to show your eccentricity on top of your head.
That ain't nothing but ultra firm.
Yeah, man. That was real talk. That was the realest talk. Like, maybe that'll be the first step to make people start liking Robert Griffin again, right? Go ahead and get that haircut. Like, every time somebody gets in real trouble, that's what they do. I was surprised Griffin had decided to just, start off something new. Like, you ever talk to people when they had those dreadlocks and they cut the dreadlocks off? And they're always like, yeah, I just felt like the weight of all these years and all this time was off my shoulders. Maybe that's what Robert Griffin needs to do. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe he needs to cut those braids off. Perhaps that's the program. By the way, speaking of those braids, where do you think Robert Griffin got his braids done in Waco? Like, you think there was somebody on campus at Baylor that did braids? Because if she did, I feel like she had to be doing the braids for the whole football team. And I actually, one time, I looked it up. I went on to one of those websites for, like, find somebody to get your braids done in Waco.
Right.
My brother, it is not exactly a braiding emporium. Waco is not the place to go if you want to have braids. I don't think I could find a single place that did braids. Here's how bad, by the way, I want to get off these Robert Griffin braids, but they've been funny for like 3 years and we can't stop now. Like, I finally got a radio show and a chance to talk about Robert Griffin and his braids.
Struggle braids.
But think about this for a second. Think about what a big deal Robert Griffin was as a rookie, right? Like, think about what a big transcendent star he was. Kids going to Halloween, like, dressing up as Robert Griffin. The Robert Griffin jersey was the best-selling jersey in the league, all of that stuff. But there wasn't nobody's revolution when it came to those braids, was it?
Can't you get that through your greasy head?
I have not heard of one child going to ask his parents, can I get some braids like Robert Griffin?
It's funny that you bring that up because now the new hairstyle with all the kids is a haircut called the Duke Starting 5. If you don't know what it is, just think of Justice Winslow with the hair and it's kind of kept.
It's a haircut, except it ain't a haircut.
Right, exactly. And that's a new thing. As you said, no one was going out let me get the Robert Griffin struggle braids.
Think about this. Kids want to look like the dudes that play for Duke, but they want to look like Robert Griffin. What's that saying? What's that saying? Right? Nah, man. He has got to do something. I think that's a positive step because I feel like this about cutting the braids if you're Robert Griffin. Okay? Even if you don't wind up being a good quarterback, at least you won't have those braids no more. I think that's how you got to look at it, right?
He'll be straight for a job interview.
That is correct. Although I will say this. Did Ray Horton ever cut those braids? He cut his, right? Ray Horton, the defensive coordinator, thinking for the Titans. You remember that when he was the defensive coordinator with the cornrows?
Yeah, I remember. Absolutely.
And Ray Horton was out there interviewing for those jobs and those cornrows, and I'm like, what am I supposed to say right now? Like, I do not engage in respectability politics in any way. I do not. But you know, let me tell you right now, you're not getting the job. Like, I can save you the time right now. You're not getting the job.
And he probably had them freshly braided, too, the night before.
Because that's what you have to do.
Fled with the do-rag and everything.
Like, what's a worse impression on a job interview? The fuzzy braids or the tight braids? I don't really have an answer for that. But you ain't getting the job. I don't make the rules.
Bomani.
We've been talking about Robert Griffin and his braids, and it got into a general discussion of the braids. But Shannon, on the real, I just watched a montage of all the hits. Dude, it looked
from
like
tonight against Detroit.
Oh man, it looked like a Rocky movie. Like, you know how you watch Rocky movies and you're like, dog, if real boxing was like this, somebody would die. That's how this feels. This dude got Robert Griffin with one hand on some horse collar and the other hand coming up between his legs.
How does that even happen?
Dog. Well, the other thing is that Griffin is just like a magnet for hits. Like, the hits that he takes in the NFL are more violent than any hits I've ever seen a player take in the NFL. Now, what's funny is that in college, Colt McCoy was that player. Like, when Michael Bennett almost killed Colt McCoy gave the thumbs up going off the field. And I'm like, yo, dude, the only guy I remember doing the thumbs up coming off the field was Mike Utley. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's what it looked like, Colt McCoy getting hit. Anyway, telephone number is 888-729-3776. Get to Subway for the new turkey and bacon guacamole today. Subway, eat fresh. There's been all these fights going on in the practices. You know, people trying to figure out what to do. I did think about something. Michael Orr and Olivier Vernon apparently got into a practice fight because the Dolphins and the Panthers have been practicing against each other. And, all these coaches on this zero tolerance about fighting. If you get caught fighting, you're going to get cut. All of that stuff. That may apply to some dudes. It wasn't going to apply to either one of them.
Those are starters.
Yeah. Look. The Panthers don't have anybody to throw the ball to. They had to go get Michael Orr to be the left tackle. Who was the dude who played left tackle for them last year? Because he stunk. Byron Bill. Isn't that it?
Yeah, that's it.
Let me tell you something. No disrespect to anybody out here who's named Byron, but if your name is Byron, boy, you better be good at what you do, Because if you're bad at what you do, the name Byron kind of exacerbates the situation. It's not your fault. I'm just letting you know. When Byron is bad at something, that Byron part becomes part of the joke. Anyway, tonight on NFL Countdown, Chris Carter came on, and he was talking about why fighting is bad, and he talked about what the fighting was like on the Buddy Ryan Eagles.
I think the best teams that are out there, they have the strongest bond. I was on a team with Buddy Ryan early in my career, and I can swear by that style was not conducive for the team being together. Compared to it being one unit, we were two units, the offense and then the defense, because there was so much fighting constantly. One player on the defense one time went to his car to get a gun. So it doesn't help the team, but we're in an era with the collective bargaining agreement where we need competitive practices.
Dog, I wish I had seen the video of the other people on the set when Chris Carter said the dude went to the truck to get the Roscoe. That's not that isn't what I was expecting to hear. Jay, did you ever hear the story about Busta Rhymes at Oklahoma? You know, the actual Busta Rhymes?
Huh?
Oh, no, Oklahoma had a wide receiver named Busta Rhymes. That's where Chuck D came up with the name for the rapper Busta Rhymes based on the wide receiver Busta Rhymes, who was at Oklahoma under Barry Switzer and was from Miami and went to Miami Northwestern High School. Anyway, while he was on campus, somebody threw a snowball at him one time, and he decided to go to his room and come back with 3 little letters, U-Z-I.
In his room?
Yes, in his room. Look, when everybody talked about Florida State and all that stuff, I'm like, look, I don't think you remember what it was like in the 80s. The 80s were the wild, wild west of college football on stuff like that. Yes, so Busta Rhymes went and got his Uzi. As it relates directly to what Chris Carter was saying about fighting, the one question I would raise to him about that is, was the problem there fighting, or was the problem there Buddy Ryan? Because I grew up in Houston, and the 1 year that Buddy Ryan was in town, Buddy Ryan is all about the defense hating the offense. Like, just as a philosophy, that's what Buddy Ryan is about. I think we talked about it the last night we were all, when Lamar Lathan beat the hell out of Spencer Tillman on the field, because Spencer Tillman was doing broadcast, and Spencer Tillman said something Lamar Lathan didn't like, and Lamar Lathan got him in practice. I think Lamar Lathan was a rookie when that happened, by the way, but Lamar Lathan got him. Like, Buddy Ryan just likes those dudes fighting. I can't really tell you too much about the fighting thing. It's going to happen. Like, you don't want a team, of course, that's fighting all the time, but sometimes you're going to wind up having those fights. I think part of why you wind up having those fights, you got to remember this, man. These dudes been football players forever, but we just now apparently getting to a point where you're telling them not to fight. I think I may have told this story on the air before, but I had a buddy who played at an SEC school. He was a defensive end, and he said something happened with him and the offensive tackle that was across from him. The offensive tackle went on to have a long NFL career. And he said they got into it. He said that he got beat. He said the tackle gave it to him, gave him that work. And he said the resolution that he had from there was that he was never going to get hit first again. Like, the second it looked like it was about to go, it was going. And he always says, he's like, yo, he's a college, the guy I'm talking about has a PhD. He's a college professor now. He's like, look, that's just the environment that you're in. Like, you're going to have a hard time civilizing that when you're asking guys to knock the hell out of each other, but to not knock the hell out of each other. That being said, ladies and gentlemen, Chris Carter mentioning that with the Eagles, there was a guy who once got into a fight and then went to his car to get the tool. Number one, I'm very curious as to which player it was that went to get the tool. My vote is for Andre Dirty Waters. Rest in peace. How great would it be if it was Reggie White, though? If Reggie White said, God told me to show you I mean business. But I would just like to give a public service announcement out there to people who don't really understand how the world can often operate. And I'm not at all proud of having been involved or around any of these situations, but I figure I need to impart a little bit of wisdom to you that I have. If you ever see a situation where two people look like they might get into a fight, and for some reason the fight doesn't jump off, and one of those people is like, you know what? That's cool. I don't even want to fight. And then they turn around to leave, you need to leave right behind them. You need to leave right after them. Because if somebody just wanted to fight and is now suddenly happy to be leaving, they're not coming back alone. You know what I mean? I just want to give you that little bit of education right there. Like, once he leaves, you need to leave too. Like, it would help.
A lot of people are making a comparison to Hustle and Raymond from White Men Can't Jump.
Yeah. Like that's real hardy horror about it. You know what I mean? I'm not talking about no comedy. I'm talking about that real life. I told you about that one time. I thought that we was about to get shot in the basketball court when I was in college, right?
Oh no.
Yeah, so school I went to was in the projects. Like, those projects has been closed since, but it was in the projects. So we decided we wanted to play ball, but the basketball goal behind our door really wasn't hitting. They had a basketball goal in the projects. We're not scared of the people in the projects, right? Let's go play some basketball. So we go over to the projects. I drove my car over there. Mistake. I drove my car over there, and we park, and we get out the car, and we're going to go play some ball. And we decided to play 5-on-5 on the full court, but we made a terrible mistake. We didn't really split up the teams. It wound up being us versus them, right? And so we're playing. One of these cats in between games is going to the side, sipping on a 40, and we're playing, and I get the ball on a breakaway. Now, I'm 6'4" with long arms and fairly big hands. I get the ball on the breakaway. We playing with one of them outdoor balls that kind of sticks. And I was going up for the layup, and the ball kind of stuck to my hand, and I couldn't really lay it up, so I just got, like, right up to the rim and just kind of dropped it in and kind of touched the rim a little bit when it went down,
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's the only time I ever dunked in a basketball game. And I'm just here to tell you that our hosts were none too pleased. The gentleman that was sipping from the 40 was like, "You don't? You don't?" And I'm like, "Yeah, maybe." Didn't really mean to. Now he went back to sipping that 40. We lost that game on purpose. Because all we could imagine was that dude leaving the court and coming back with the yam.
Yeah.
Yeah, the moral of the story, man, be very careful when you're playing basketball with strangers.
You might want to split up those teams.
Yeah. Split up those teams. And if somebody's a little bit too excited about not fighting, you need to go home. The game's over.
Geico presents Strange Saving Stories. Astronomers detected an interstellar transmission. It stated, Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more. The implications were staggering. Was the cosmos telling us we could all save hundreds on car insurance with Geico? Or did their radar merely pick up a signal from the nearby Rufus and Clyde's morning show? We may never know.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
There's a story about Baylor football that I want to tell you about. It's possible you might be hearing about this for the first time here, but I think that it is a very significant story, and I think that there are a number of levels that we need to think about and consider. It may take a while, but I think that you will understand why I am going about this. Now, Baylor has been a feel-good program for the last 4 or 5 years. Basically, they're Baylor and now they're good. Like, the idea of Baylor being good is so insane for those of us who have grown up watching college football. It's nuts, all right? Baylor was good. Now, it's one thing to be good when you have Robert Griffin. It's another thing to win the Big 12 when you don't, all right? We can talk about Oklahoma and Texas being down, whatever. They are still Baylor, all right? Go through and look at the records in all those years. This is the story that everybody wants to feel good about. They've got a coach that all of us in the media like. We like Art Briles in part because Art Briles seems like a good dude. He gives good interviews. He gives great quotes. He's the high school coach, the super Texas guy. Like, he's a construction of a football coach that harkens back to a different time, and we love stuff like that, right? Art Briles has got a hell of a lot of explaining to do, as does everybody basically associated with Baylor University after I tell you this story. Now, there's a player. His name is Sam Ukwachu. Okay, Sam Ukwachu. He was a freshman All-American who transferred from Boise State to Baylor. He missed the 2014 season. Baylor chalked it up to unspecified reasons. They didn't tell anybody why. And Baylor's defensive coordinator, Phil Bennett, apparently has been telling people for a while that Ukwachu was going to be playing this year. I mean, that's the kind of talent that a few years ago we'd have never considered Baylor ever having, right? So they're excited about that, like a guy that can go out there and could generate a pass rush, right? Well, we got this out of a story from Texas Monthly magazine that came out today. A story is written by Jessica Luther and Dan Solomon, okay? So Baylor's like, yo, this guy's going to play. We can't wait. The guy's going to play. The guy's going to play. Like, why didn't he play last year? Unspecified reasons. It appears that the unspecified reason was 2 counts of sexual assault that the young man was indicted for in June of 2014. And today, that young man was convicted of sexual assault. And nobody knew. Nobody knew. Outside of Baylor. Nobody knew. Like, this is in the public record. Like, Texas Monthly makes the point. Like, this was in the public record. How in the world did nobody know? And understand, when I say how did nobody know, my buddy Sean Adams, who does radio out of Austin, he made a good point about this. He's like, where is the local newspaper on this one? How in the world can you have a player who, by the way, had to transfer from his last school because of an incident involving violence against a woman, where Boise State was not so excited about the idea of that dude playing football again? How does he wind up on your campus, be accused of sexual assault, and still be there through the trial? Like, how does that happen? Because college football teams, look, it's an institution, and the institution is primarily concerned with its own self-preservation, right? Like, that's how these things work. I don't think they're out here doing anybody any favors. But the math is as follows. If you get a guy who at a previous place caught a charge or was in an incident involving violence against a woman, and there is even an accusation of that on your new campus, he's got to go. Like, that's it. You can't roll the dice on that one. It's not a matter of innocent until proven guilty or anything else, because that's for the courts. For you, he has got to go, right? He didn't go from Baylor. I'm assuming he's gone now. I mean, he just got convicted of sexual assault. Why in the world did he not go? And how in the world did nobody have any idea of this until the Texas Monthly story came out? Now, there's another level to this that I think you need to know from this Texas Monthly story. Baylor did its own investigation. Okay? Baylor did its own investigation. The investigation apparently was so bad that the judge in this case did not allow the defense to enter that investigation into evidence because they would deem that it was too prejudicial. Right? That if they were to put that in and call it an investigation, like it was disingenuous to call it an investigation. The school never saw the rape kit, according to this story in Texas Monthly. The investigation was interviewing Ugwachu, who was the accused, his accuser, and one friend of each person. That was it. Apparently, the whole game for Baylor was, we're going to get this dude back on the field. How does that happen? And the fair question, now that this is known, is that a fireable offense? Because I think we'd agree that in a lot of places this would be a fireable offense. The thing is, at Baylor, Art Browse is doing the impossible right now. And people who matter knew about this. The only way that this becomes a fireable offense is if the people who pump money into that football program deem that this is something that they won't tolerate. You think they're willing to do this for 11, 12 wins? You think they're willing to endure this for 11 or 12 wins? Because I think they're willing to endure it for 11 or 12 wins. We watched at Oklahoma where people endured Barry Switzer and those teams for those titles. And when the win total started looking like 7 or 8, Barry Switzer was out of there. That's when time was up. Here's the thing I don't think that people are thinking enough about as it relates to this. And this is the question that I have, and this is why I think that this is beyond simply the idea of another institution apparently ignoring sexual assault and acting like it's something that does not need to be taken seriously, right? Beyond that part, you have to look at the success that Baylor has. Now, look, I think we all understand something about college football. The good teams are pretty much always good. Like, if you put everybody on a level playing field, the powers will always dominate. They just have too many natural built-in advantages, right? If you leave everything level, your big-name powers are going to be the one to come out on top. The Ohio States, the Texas, the Alabamas, all those big brand names, because the brand name is what attracts the players, all right? And those schools are typically in places that players want to go. They're treated very well. There's a lot of fun to be had, everything else, okay? That's how it goes. How in the world do you convince 85 dudes good enough to win the Big 12 to come spend the best years of their life in Waco? Like, really, how do you do it? How do you do it? So you always have these schools of a lower tier that manage to win or exceed expectation. The question then always becomes, how is this done? So for a while, you have those schools like in the conferences like the Big East, for example, where there weren't that many football powers, but you see West Virginia get really good in these other schools. Well, a lot of those schools can let in players academically that other schools can't get. Like, that's how you get great players at those places. You have to take the guys that other schools can't get. All right? That's how those schools wind up making it. Like Oklahoma, for example, we think of them as that traditional power, but, man, it's not easy to win at Oklahoma, and it's not easy to recruit at Oklahoma. And when they dominated in the way they did under Switzer, you saw what it was, because that's what you had to do to get players to go play in Norman. That's what it had to be. So what do you have to do to get guys to come to Baylor? Like, it's a fair question to ask without anything sinister beneath it. Baylor's been terrible forever. How are you now getting guys good enough to win the Big 12 to come to Baylor? Like, that's a question to be asked to write a book or anything else, right? But if I find out that you've got a pass rusher who just transferred in because of an incident with violence against a woman and then winds up at Baylor and gets convicted of an incident of violence against a woman, and we didn't find anything out about it in between, what else don't we know, and who else don't we know it about? There's no way that you can look at this story responsibly and not then have that question. Because if they could keep a sexual assault from the world, what else? That's like short of that, but still matters. So if you're Baylor, I think you guys better buckle up, because I think we're about to find out how the sausage was made. And I'm not making any insinuation about what's going on there. I'll just say this. After you give me this, I have no idea what else is going on. But I do have a whole lot of track record to say it's hard to win at places like that without having to let stuff go. Our Browns are going to have to answer for just how much they're letting go to get this done.
Bomani.
I was talking last segment about the story that's come out about Baylor University, where one of their football players was just convicted of sexual assault today, and somehow nobody knew that he was even on trial for sexual assault until the day that he got convicted, until the Texas Monthly story came out that Baylor itself has a lot of explaining to do for how it is that we would not know about this and why the defensive coordinator would spend months saying that the young man would be playing. Like, he was set to go to trial for sexual assault. How can you say, nah, he's going to play? Like, I just can't figure out, like, because for the reason I say that is, he might not play. Like, right now he's not playing. Like, why would you even make that promise? You know damn well he might not play. He might not play. But remember this, man. Baylor is where the whole Dave Bliss thing happened, right? And I'm not saying anything about, like, anything intrinsic about the culture at the school or anything like that. I'm just saying you saw the things that Dave Bliss did to try to win at Baylor. Like, that's what you had there. That's what it was to try to win at Baylor. For one, you hire Dave Bliss. Like, you hire a guy like that to try to win at Baylor. Those are the things at these places where it's really hard to win in football. Like, look, you think about the schools that have jumped up in relevance in the last, say, 25 years? Because it's hard to do. The powers in college football are pretty well entrenched. You know, some of them may be down for a little while, but it's hard to come up as like a legitimate power. But think about the schools that have emerged as powers in the last 25 or 30 years. It's really like the 3 Florida schools that you can think of off the top of your head, right? Florida, Florida State, and Miami. They had emergencies like that. Kansas State, we can't forget that Kansas State used to be the worst college football team in the country. And then, they've been national championship contenders before. They've won the Big 12. You can point to them. There are probably a couple others that you could point to that I just can't think of off the top of my head. But how did that happen in Florida? There was a population boom. Like, that's the biggest thing that happened to add to the rise of Florida football. The population of Florida in the last 30 years has exploded. How did Kansas State manage to pull it off? Well, Kansas State, they figured out how to play that JUCO system. And Kansas State be out there with, like, grown men on the team, like 23, 24 years old.
As long as you got eligibility.
Yeah, whatever it takes, right? Like, that's what Kansas State is playing a different game. The kids that Kansas State is recruiting, they're not the same they're not the same kids that Texas is recruiting. Like, they're doing this differently. But to win in a place that hasn't won before, something typically has to happen, and that something typically goes beyond just simply getting a good coach or just simply getting good players. There's something that has to be done there often. And what's going to happen with Baylor is somebody's going to have to ask the question as to how exactly it is you guys got so good. And maybe the answers are innocent. It is entirely possible that the answers on how they got so good is just training, prayers, vitamins, and our brows. Like, maybe that's all it is. Maybe that's all it took. But people are going to start asking questions as to how in the world this happened. But the big one that I want to talk about right now, this is a failing of media. Like, this is a colossal failure of media. And the reason I say that is there's a local paper, the Waco Tribune, right? I don't know what their resources are like. I don't know, how many reporters they've had to lay off or anything else, because a lot of these newspapers are just understaffed, and they don't have the people that would allow them to do the thorough work that they were able to do at a different point in time, right? So, I want to be careful because I don't know what their situation is. But I find it very difficult to believe that the Waco Tribune does not have anybody whose job is just to know what's going on at the courthouse. And I find it very, very difficult to believe that the Waco Tribune doesn't have somebody at the police station, at anywhere, wherever. There is nobody that can let you know what was going on in such a way that would allow you to simply go look it up as it is public record and then print it. Like, you don't even have to have a source on this one. It's in the record. Like, you don't have to attribute it to anybody anonymous. You don't have to roll the dice on messing it up for anybody. All you had to do was go look it up. How did that not happen? And so I can talk about this, like, in the context of football and Baylor and, NCAA stuff. Yeah. That's one thing, right? The other thing is, it appears that has been someone on campus who is a legitimate, safety risk to your students, specifically to the women on your campus. And you're just going to have this dude out there and nobody know what's going on? Like, how, not just as the institution, but as the people who cover the institution, how is it possible that happens? Like, how can it be? Now, there is I would argue, a larger systemic issue with the coverage of college sports, which is the athletic departments simply have too much power because they have all the control over all the access. All the access. The coach is king. You don't get to talk to the players very much. You're not really going to get to be around the assistants like that. They can crush your access if they want to. You can't do your job without that access. But somebody had to know what was going on. And if you didn't know what was going on, we have to raise the question as to, are you qualified to do your job? Like, somebody's either going to have to answer on this one. As people who cover Baylor's program, you're either going to have to answer for yourself being incompetent or apathetic and indifferent towards sexual assault. Like there's just no defending it. Somebody's going to have to come up on it. I just don't think it is reasonable to believe that people whose jobs it is to find stuff out, none of them found this out. And if you knew and you kept it to yourself, maybe you got your reasons, right? You can deal with that as you want. I'm not here to judge that necessarily. But if you didn't know, how? And if you didn't know, like, how are you trusting the people that are supposed to keep you informed on what's going on with that program? Like, really, it's far too easy for me to just wag the finger at Baylor and say, how could you do this, when watching over Baylor is kind of our jobs. Like, as an industry, that's on us. That's a lot of failure in watching over them.
And now, for Geico's edition of Stuff Found in Your Car, we go inside your side door pocket.
Hello, yes, the crumpled receipt with gum in it. From your anniversary dinner, you sprang for expensive wine, your server was Beth. That dinner was a couple $100. Money you could get back if you switched to Geico and saved hundreds of dollars on your car insurance. I bet you'd save that receipt. Frame it even. But really, where did I go wrong? Was it the corkage fee?
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance. Visit geico.com today.
Our next guest, he's a reporter for ESPN's NFL Nation, does a lot with the Miami Dolphins. His name is James Walker. James, what's going on?
Bomani, I'm doing good, man. I'm feeling the Tribe Called Quest. That's a good song for this time of night.
Yeah, man, glad you dig it. Now, I have to ask you this, man, because it's been very interesting. I live in Miami, and even for, who knows how many years, you ask me how the Dolphins are going to finish next year, I'd say 7-9 or 8 or 8-8. You don't have to tell me anything else. They look like they're actually going to be good this year. Like, do I have this wrong?
I think you're right, Bomani, and, this is as optimistic as I've been about the team since I've been down here. I've been in South Florida for 4 years. So I've seen a lot of 8-8. I've seen a lot of 7-9. I know what that looks like. And what I'm seeing right now, I'm just seeing a different group. I really think the addition of Ndamukong Suh, not just on the field, but just his presence, he's making other guys around him more confident because they know they got the baddest dog in the fight. So they feel a lot more confident in what they're doing. And, I really think just his impact, obviously on the field, just being who Ndamukong Suh is, the player, the great player that he is, but also just sort of impacting the other 10 guys on defense and really the rest of that locker room, knowing that they got a top 10 player in their locker room. Because really, the Dolphins, the thing that they lacked, they had a lot of decent players, a lot of solid players, a lot of good players, but they haven't really had that game changer in a long time. And I think Ndamukong Suh is going to be that guy for them on that defensive side.
Now, is there any expectation of him being a leader beyond, simply being really good?
Yeah, there is, and that's a great question. One of the things that Mike Tannenbaum, the new vice president of the Dolphins, told Ndamukong when they signed him to that $114 million contract is, look, you're going to have to provide leadership. That's something that he deferred to Calvin Johnson, to Matthew Stafford in Detroit. That's something that he was criticized for in Detroit. And Ndamukong, to his credit, said, yeah, he'll do it. I think $114 million will make a lot of people say, yeah, I'll be a leader. But it looks like, at least early on, he's really taking those steps forward. There's a rookie second-round pick in Jordan Phillips, who's a defensive tackle, that worked out with Ndamukong Suh during the offseason. That's something that Ndamukong Suh hadn't done really in the past, at least in Detroit. But he's taken a rookie under his wing, and we asked him, during the media portion of interviews, why'd you work out with the rookie? Of all the players, you would think maybe Cameron Wake, maybe Ryan Tannehill, he would try to build rapport with those guys. But he said, look, you're only as good as your weakest link, and they have a rookie second-round pick that's going to play maybe 10, 15 snaps a game. So for him to take Jordan Phillips under his wing, I think is a good first step towards that playing that leadership role.
All right, we're talking to James Walker of ESPN, and I think a lot of people are hearing that and then asking the question that if Ndamukong Suh is taking that young man under his wing, is that young man going to start stepping on people? Like, how do the Dolphins feel about him at his maturity?
I asked Joe Philbin that at the start of training camp in terms of how are you going to get Ndamukong Suh to still be the guy that he is, but sort of play within the confines of the rules all the time and within the whistle. And Joe Philbin brought up a good point. He said that the Dolphins they led the league in the fewest penalties last year, so they feel like they can coach him up and sort of get Suh to be Suh, but still not the guy that's been fined every year in the league or suspended. He's been fined or suspended every year he's been in the league. So they feel like that streak's going to end. Obviously, the officials are going to be watching him closely because he has a track record of that. And I think the Dolphins coaching staff is going to be very mindful of that. And I think Ndamukong Suh is going to do all he can to fit in that respect.
All right, now living in Miami, I think this won't be a shock to anybody outside the city, but the questions about this team probably hinge most on two people, and the question as to whether or not they are NFL caliber at their jobs. One of them is their quarterback, Ryan Tannehill. The other is the head coach, Joe Philbin. Now, with Tannehill, I've been reading your stories about Tannehill actually connecting on deep passes. You seem to be on board.
Yep. I'm shocked. I'm really shocked. It's something that in 4 seasons of practices and 4 seasons of training camps, and 4 seasons of games, as most people, can see on Sundays, I really have not seen him be, able to connect on the deep ball with any consistency. And all of a sudden, it's something that he really focused on this offseason and in this training camp and really in the offseason as well. He's hit on at least, 1 or 2 deep balls, every other practice, where before, he wouldn't get that amount in 2 or 3 weeks. So I don't think he's going to all of a sudden be Aaron Rodgers where, every Sunday you're going to see him, connect on a 40 or 50-yard bomb. But the fact that he's at least doing it with a little consistency in practice now, I really think that's a good stride for him in that direction, because really that's probably his biggest weakness. He has a lot of strengths in terms of toughness. He has a lot of intangibles. He can move his feet. He can throw on the run. He's good with that short and intermediate game. But if he can connect on the deep ball at least a little bit, at least enough to give the safeties a threat to stay back, I really think that's going to be a good step forward for their passing game. And at least I've seen it in practice. Now, he hasn't done it yet in the preseason. We'll see if he does that in the second preseason game this week when they play the Carolina Panthers. But at least in practice, I've seen him do it, which is a good sign for him.
I'll tell you, it's hard for me to believe because he couldn't do it at Texas A&M either.
Yep, you're exactly right. Like I said, I'm shocked because you watch his game tape. It's not on tape. It's not on anything I've seen in practice. So the fact that he's doing it now, and I think maybe some credit needs to go to their receivers as well. I think one of the smart things that the Dolphins did do this year was they did a lot of change at receiver to get guys that sort of fit his skill set. Mike Wallace was a guy that will run by his defender and would be open by 5 yards, but he wouldn't necessarily fight for the ball. Now they got some guys like Greg Jennings, like Devontae Parker, Jordan Cameron, their new tight end. They can go up and get the ball. So even if it's not a perfect throw, they can at least fight for the ball. And I think Ryan's sort of trusting his receivers a little more to give them those one-on-one opportunities where in the past he wouldn't, necessarily trust Brian Hartline or Mike Wallace or Brandon Gibson to really go up and fight for the ball. So I think that's really one thing that they've done that was really smart in the offseason.
All right, talking to James Walker of ESPN covering the Miami Dolphins, and Principal Philbin. I've always called him Principal Philbin. He has a very high school principal.
From Hard Knocks, right?
Yeah, but it's been kind of hard, and I always wonder how fair we're being to Philbin on that, is whether he gives the appearance of being a head coach, and then the team, the years he's been there, has just seemed to be almost kind of there. But what kind of progress have you seen from him in his time on that job?
Yeah, by the way, I think your criticism is accurate. I think it's fair. When you're 23 and 25 as a head coach in 3 seasons and you haven't had a winning season yet, I think any criticism that comes his way is fair. But he's making progress in terms of relating better with his players. And one thing that he told me was that when he was an offensive coordinator, he only had to worry about one side of the ball. So it was a lot easier to establish a rapport, establish a relationship with the quarterback, with the wide receivers, the center, the tight end, when you only had that side of the ball to worry about. And he said one mistake that he wished he could take back when he became a head coach was that he didn't necessarily use that trait anymore of being able to relate to his players, because he had 53 problems, 53 guys to worry about, a lot of problems coming across his desk, game tape study on offense and defense, coming up with game plans, all those new things that you have to do when you make that jump from offensive coordinator to a head coach sort of overwhelmed him to the point where he sort of lost that ability, or at least that willingness in his first 3 years to make sure he's keeping those relationships with his players. And I think that's why some of the things you saw with Bullygate 2 years ago, with Mike Wallace, getting benched at halftime in that last game last season, some of the things that you saw was sort of a byproduct of that. And I think he really learned his lesson with that. And he's trying this year to relate more with his players, to sort of give more duties to his offensive and defensive coordinators so he can do some of those things that he did when he was sort of a top-notch assistant. So I think he really learned his lesson with that. We'll see if he can change that in 1 year. But this is obviously a big year for him, where he may only get 1 year to prove that he can be that kind of coach that he thinks he can be.
Well, you mentioned his attempts to relate to his players better. Do you want to tell the people where he took the team today, or do you want me to tell the people where he took the team today?
I'll let you tell him. I know that he took them to the movie theaters to see Straight Outta Compton.
That's right. That's right.
Yes. Instead of doing the walkthrough session, he took them to a bonding thing. And that's something that they're trying to do more now. I remember they had a kickball game earlier this summer. They went to see Straight Outta Compton, which I just can't picture that in my mind, him sitting in the movie theater watching that movie. But, I think the team definitely enjoyed it. And those are the kind of steps that he's trying to take going forward. He thinks, doing those things will sort of help, especially when the going gets tough. Because one thing that I've seen in Philbin's 3 years is that when the going gets tough, in late December, guys are hurt, guys are banged up, they need to push through, they need to get to the playoffs. They're not really going that extra mile, to win games. So at least, if he can establish that better rapport with players when they need to sort of push through and fight through, especially late in the season when everybody's banged up and everybody's really trying to win to make that playoff push, they'll go that extra mile for the head coach. And I think that's really, he's trying to build those relationships now in August to where it could pay off in November and December.
So what do you think? He's a Straight Outta Compton guy, 100 miles and running, E-Phil, fo zagging. Which one do you think? What song do you think is coming out Straight Outta Compton? And Joe Philbin's like, yeah, that's my jam.
Oh man, I would bet that he wouldn't know none of those songs that you mentioned, and even after the movie, I would bet that he probably still doesn't know any of those songs. So I don't think that's necessarily his thing. I think he's a Seinfeld guy. From talking to him, I know he's sort of a Seinfeld aficionado. Which is very different from being an NWA aficionado.
All right, James Walker, he covers the Dolphins for ESPN's NFL Nation. My man, thanks so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Hey, no problem, Bomani. Call me anytime. Always fun.